Hello everyone, Reza here. We are going to continue with our facial rigging for beginners series. In this video, we are going to focus on eyebrows and we're going to set up controls for them. So let's begin. Cool, we're going to pick up where we left off. First things first, I need to make sure that the characters on the display layer are all referenced, so we're not going to select it by accident. We can certainly toggle it on and off if we want to, but it's time to bring our deformers back. So I'm going to make sure that the show deformers is on. I don't need to see the lattice anymore, so I'm going to select the lattice, press the up arrow to get to the group node, and then I can turn off its visibility. Now all we have is the clusters. Now, in order not to pick something else, because joint selection is also enabled and geometry selection is also enabled, I can go to this area here, turn off geometry and turn off joint selection. Feel free to even go ahead and turn off the curves. This is what we want to be on, the deformers. So with that, I can set up controls for each cluster. Now, in order to get to the right location for each cluster, I need to make sure that local rotation axis is on. I'm going to turn off the display layer, and that allows me to kind of have them selected in the scene, and it's much easier to select them. I'm going to frame them in the outliner so I can actually select all of them. Later on, we see how we can make use of the naming convention and use the same naming convention for our controls. So having them open in the outliner is actually quite useful. And now with all of them selection, I'm just going to enable local rotation axis on them. Now I have a point to snap to if I want. Now it really doesn't matter what sort of controls you use for each point. We are going to use 3 for the left hand side, 3 for the right hand side, 1 at the center, but for each 3 we're going to have a sort of parent control as well to control all 3, while you have individual controls over every single cluster. So that's the basic general plan. I'm going to go with the sphere control. I think it's a good one to pick. I'm going to move it up, zoom in, and hold down a V, snap it to the point. Now up to you if you think it's the right size. Of course, the size changes based on the character you have. But I think for mine, this is a bit too large. Maybe I can go even 0.3. Yeah, that's about right. And from now on, I need to kind of duplicate across, and then we can recolor, freeze transform, you know the drill. Now with that, I'm going to press Ctrl D, W, hold down V, snap, and repeat the same thing pretty much. Feel free to have one for one side and then mirror it to the other side. That's possible too. So while I have this guy here, I can color this yellow because it's at the center. I can select the other 3. I can color them red. With those selected, I think it's time to freeze their transformations and rename them. So select all of them, freeze transformation, so there's no translation values on any of them, and let's rename it. For renaming, I can probably repurpose the naming that I have for my clusters and kind of use the same sort of naming convention. So if I look at this one, cluster browse A01, I can copy the name, go into its control, and use the same naming convention. Instead of cluster, I'm just going to use CTRL, same naming convention that I've been using for all of my controllers. Now the second one is going to be B. So for B, I'm going to just rename CTRL L, and for C, same naming convention for the control, CTRL L browse 01. Of course, we don't want to forget about the center, so I'm going to select the center and call that one CTRL L browse center 01. Now We want the pivot point to stay at the same location, but the kind of physical location of them, the points, the vertices, the way we select them, we can certainly move them out of this geometry, because right now they're inside the geometry, apart from the C, the last one. So with that, what I can do is to go to the component mode. Obviously, I'm going to select all the control curves, and then I can kind of move them out. Now, to make it easier for us, I'm just going to switch to front, and that allows me to kind of make the look more in line with the eyebrows we have here. Again, it's a totally optional step, simply because the pivot point stays put right at the clusters, but the kind of visual appearance, we would like to have that in line with the look of our character. And that's why I left the eyebrows, the visibility of the eyebrows on. I think that looks good. I can select them, select these three, press Control D to duplicate, Control G to put them in a group, and I can just easily mirror them to the other side, which is -1 in X. Fantastic. Now all I need to do is to rename them, well, ungroup them, freeze their transformation, and recolor them. So let's go through them one by one. I'm going to select the first one, and I can actually select all three and make them blue. So coloring is done. I can select the group node, go to edit, unparent. That's done. And all I need to do is just to replace L with R and 02 to 01. Okay, I'm going to select the three and hit freeze transform on them, so there's no minus value on any of these controls. Back to perspective. You can see it kind of works. Feel free to, if you want them to sit exactly on top of the eyebrows, select this one and then select this one and move this back. I really have a tendency not to push that into the geometry. It's totally up to you. You sure can. So I think this will get the job done. Really, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I can actually select this one and just pull this out a little so it's not inside the geometry. All I care about is it needs to be easy to select. I think that's going to do the trick. Now with this, you can see that even though I move them around, the pivot point is exactly the same location as the clusters, and that's the important part. Now I don't need to have local rotation axis on anymore, so I can select all the clusters and turn off local rotation axis. Good. Now with that, let's create one parent control for each three brows, or brow controls rather. Gonna select the control creator doc. I probably use, really not sure what to use. Spike cross control might be a good one. So I'm going to move it up, maybe scale it just a little bit, and probably don't need this side. So I can kind of deselect this point, get rid of that, deselect this point, get rid of that, and this point we don't need. Something like that. I can turn off the visibility of my geometry. Where should we snap it to? Let's snap it to the joint B. I think it's time to select the B clusters. Enable the local rotation axis. We need one for the left hand side, one for the right hand side, and with that I can actually hold down V and snap it to the place. Same thing, same deal with the smaller eyebrow controls. I can select them through component editor, move this out, rotate it, align it with the shape that I have. Again, an optional step really. Moving to front, make sure it kind of reads well as well. maybe selecting this side, move it slightly to the other side, and of course I need to freeze the transformation. I need to recolor, and I need to rename. So one of these names I can copy, select the main eyebrow control, and instead of having CTRL L brow A, B, or C, I can just go CTRL L brow 01. That should do the trick. I'm not going to lock and hide any of these translations because later on you see when I connect them to the clusters, I can actually make use of, I don't know, scale attributes to kind of bulge an area. So I leave everything on. It's better for you to leave everything on. Now time to mirror to the other side. So Control D, Control G, really the same trick. -1, mirror to the other side. I can select the group node, go to edit and ungroup. I can rename it to CTRL R brow 01. And of course, last step is to reset and freeze, not reset actually, freeze the transformation. Of course, I need to recolor it as well. So I'm going to recolor it blue. I think that should do it, at least at this point, for control curve creation. Now let's have a look at the next chapter when we connect each control to the cluster. Okay, this bit is actually very easy. We just need to constrain the clusters to the control curves. Make sure not to parent them, just to showcase it to you. If you were to kind of select the child and select the parent, in this case the cluster, you can see when you move the control curve, nothing happens. Simply because the cluster needs to update individually, and as soon as you parent it, or as soon as it receives a child, it kind of loses its functionality. So that's not going to work. We have to use constraints. We select the driver, which is always the opposite to parenting, and then select the driven, and I'm going to go to constraints, parent constraint, make sure to reset its settings, add. We want to make use of the scale as well, so we go to constraint, scale, reset its settings, and add. We pretty much need to do the same thing for the other brow controls. If you find yourself in a position that you have to repeat a tool or two few times, I suggest you use edit recent commands list. And that actually shows you all the commands that you've recently used. Makes it a lot easier to just pick one, click on it, and make use of it. For example, parent constraint is here and scale constraint is here. So all I need to do, of course, would be much easier for me to hide the geometry. And of course, it would be much easier for me not to see local rotation axis. That's better. So with that, I can just select the driver, driven, and I go to parent constraint, driver, driven, and then scale constraint. Done. All right, now that's done, I can bring the geometry back. And now if I were to select each brow, let's say this one, and try to move it, you can see the skin moves. Later on, we are going to connect the eyebrows to the movement that we're getting, but I can actually hide the eyebrow geometry for now. I can actually go in here, select the eyebrow geometry so it's not too distracting, so we can have a look at the area. But look, if I select any of these guys, they should move the skin underneath. This is fantastic. So later on, when we connect our eyebrow geometry to these guys, the eyebrow is going to just follow the movement of these small controls. Now, I can actually do a little bit of cleanup on what we have. So we are going to select everything, but we need to connect them because right now they're just right here. I can connect them to the main eyebrow. So press P to parent, and now this guy is going to move all three. Going to rotate all three, and of course you can even scale them individually or through the parent. I'm going to do the same thing here. So select all three, select the parent one, and press the P key. Now, where do these guys going to go? These guys are not going to get parented to the head bone, but rather the jaw control. So select those two parent eyebrows, shift select the jaw control, and press the P key. Definitely make sure to test it. So if I select the jaw control and rotate, you can see they successfully follow. I don't think we need the clusters anymore. So I'm going to actually lock and hide the translation of the cluster group node because we really don't need to see them. It leaves us with only visibility, and I can just hide them. Now that's much cleaner, and I think I left this guy here. So this guy again goes into the jawbone, the P key, and if I select, all of them should follow. Constantly check, make sure there is no leftovers in the outliner, and we're now good to go. So controls for the eyebrows are now hooked up. It's time to sort of attach the eyebrow geometry that we have. So I can bring this eyebrow geometry to follow the facial deformation that we're getting. And we're pretty much done with this session. Okay, so I've got two eyebrows visible, and let's attach the eyebrows to the deformation of the skin underneath. The technique I tend to use for that is a wonderful tool we have in Maya, and that's part of the deformer sets, and it's called a wrap deformer. Now, wrap deformer has got a deformable. Now, wrap deformer has got a deformable object, the one that is going to be moved by another object, and a wrap influence object, the one that actually moves and drives the other objects. So in order to get that one to work, we select the deformable object and control select the wrap influence object in that order, and then we go to a deform and then wrap option box. There's not much we need to change here. The only one, because this polygon, the geometry that we have, the eyebrows, this actually slides along another surface. So I tend to use the fall off mode set to surface. And sometimes if you get an overshoot, not the result that you want, I tend to turn off auto weight threshold, but this is something that you can turn on and off after the fact too, so I'm not going to touch that. We'll see what sort of result we're getting and we take it from there. So I'm going to go apply. Now, moment of truth, let's test it, and we get wonderful results. That's fantastic. So I really don't need to make any changes, and this is working beautifully. Let's test the first one as well. Yep. And remember, the first control and the last control, we made the movement of it a bit subtle, so it's not going to be as much. The one that I use the most is probably the one in the middle. And if you want to get extreme expressions, you just move the parent to get the main expression. So you can see it's really working for us. That scale that I talked about, we can kind of get some stylized effects with that as well. And that's how you get this one to work. Very simple. So let's quickly do this for the other side. I'm going to select the geometry and shift select the influence object and go apply. If I select the one in the middle, you can see it works beautifully. And now you can easily kind of give this an expression that you want using your clusters, and you know, that's going to look awesome. Something like that. So that's done. Let's really quickly connect the hair geometry because I constantly need to turn the visibility of this off. So let's make this follow the skin that we have, and we also put very simple controls for the tongue. I don't want to go too overboard with the tongue and the deformation because it's not an advanced course. Very simple attributes that we can hook in and get the tongue to roll and simple stuff. And then after that, we can get to the expressions afterwards. All right, thank you very much and see you in the next video.